All right, hey everyone, it's March the 16th, the year 2017, and we got I believe, if I'm not mistaken, our very first letter from Schuyler Pyatte Barbeau, who has been in prison for over a year, hasn't even been to trial yet, and the main charge against him is that he had a 10.5-inch barrel on his gun, and in my mind that makes it a long pistol, but I'm not sure exactly why somebody would be targeted as a domestic terrorist because your barrel of your firearm is 10.5 inches versus 16 inches. Absolutely insane. The level at which our government is persecuting Christian patriots, patriot political prisoners. And you've got his address on the screen at FDC SeaTac. I pray you guys write him a letter. We have read various letters from Schuyler Barbeau on the Gary Hunt website, Outpost of Freedom. And you can tell a man from reading many of his letters out of the how does it go? The abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak, right? And when you read the writings of Schuyler Barbeau, you can tell he loves the Constitution, he loves freedom, he's a Christian patriot, and it's been a real pleasure to read his writings, and we got a phone call from him. And today, if I'm not mistaken, we get so many letters from so many people, and I hope I'm not, remembering this wrong, but I believe we got our first letter, and I'll have to make a whole new file folder just for Schuyler. I should also say that Schuyler has a mother out there on Facebook. My wife has communicated with her a few times. Her name is Stacy Barbeau, and she loves her son. She is Schuyler's biggest supporter, and praise God for family members like Stacy Barbeau who stand by their son, their family, and we need to support Stacy and her efforts to make noise and shine light about the unjust persecution by a corrupt FBI and a corrupt Department of Justice. Corrupt Department of Justice that has gone after her son. My phone is just going crazy right now. In any event, I'm going to have to answer those phone things later. Man, that's just going crazy. All right. Anyway, let's read Schuyler's letter, and let's get this up on YouTube. Looks like he did a newspaper clipping, 4A news from across the USA. Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. Alabama Corrections Commissioner Jeff Dunn says the risk in states' crowded prisons is growing each day. Dunn addressed a panel of state lawmakers last week in an effort to build support for an $800 million prison construction bond issue. Governor Robert Bentley has proposed 3 new mega prisons. My. We already have 25% of the world's prison population and only 4% of the world's population. America imprisons more people than anybody on the planet, any country on the planet. And you would think we would be trying to empty our prisons, but no, we're trying to build more. Absolutely insane. I'm not 100% sure if this is a cartoon that Schuyler drew. It's very possible he drew this. I don't know that for a fact. No, it says A-B. Oh, Schuyler Barbeau. That could be S. I'm not sure. It says maybe A-B, but could that be S? Maybe if somebody knows. If somebody knows, let me know if Schuyler drew these cartoons. But regardless if they drew them, let's read them. The first frame, as you can see, says the Supreme Court extends Congress reach. So you got, I guess, Congress over here and the Supreme Court, and they're extending Congress reach. They're trying to get that gun when it should be when it should be cutting it off, and then the Supreme Court should be cutting the arm off, not making the long arm of Congress even longer. I like that. Supreme Court says, quote, the fact that Raich did not herself affect interstate commerce was of no moment. When Congress makes an interstate omelet, it is entitled to break a few interstate eggs. Gonzalez versus Raich, 545 U.S. 1. However, according to the Bill of Rights, some eggs cannot be broken, like the Second Amendment shall not be infringed, the First Amendment, free speech, 4A, to the right to be secure in our possessions. However, again, the Supreme Court says what it wants because it is the Supreme Court and it makes the supreme law. and because it is part of the supreme government of the world, and you only have the rights they say you have because supremacy. So that is the cartoon that he sent. Here's another one. For example, referencing the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals opinion in the Supreme Court's United States versus Lanier 520 U.S. 259 case, the court said, quote, the in-bank court expressed the view that, one, criminal liability may be imposed under Section 242 only if the constitutional right said to have been violated, A, is the first identified in a decision of the United States Supreme Court. Or another example, the Supreme Court said, quote, like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited and is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. District of Columbia versus Heller 554 U.S. AT 626. And then you have the Supreme Court saying can't touch this. Of the three branches of the federal government, the judicial is shielded from the politics of the other two. Judges are not elected and thus not accountable to constituents, we the people. There's, it looks like some articles. Let's blow this up a little bit. I'll read the one on the left first. Ban on assault weapons, large magazines held constitutional. Assault weapons and large capacity magazines are akin to weapons of war, unprotected by the Second Amendment. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit held February 21st, Colby versus Hogan, 207 BL 5197971, Fourth Circuit in blank, number 14-1945, 22117. A Maryland law banning such weapons is therefore constitutional. Judge Robert B. King wrote for the in-bank court. The decision noted the large number of mass shootings perpetrated by such military-style weapons. The panel opinion in this case had created a circuit split in requiring strict scrutiny for restrictions on the Second Amendment's right to bear arms. But the full court held that intermediate scrutiny was the correct analysis. The restrictions, therefore, must be reasonably adapted to a substantial government interest, instead of being narrowly tailored to achieve a compelling government interest. Where did that come from? The opinion restricts the ability of citizens to possess a gun in common use. James B. Astrachan Gunst, and Thomas P.C. Baltimore, who represented a number of amici supporting the plaintiffs, told Bloomberg B&A. Astrachan also noted that the Fourth Circuit held that the AR-15 isn't protected by the Second Amendment because it's M16-like, but all the other courts that have addressed the issue have ruled that these guns are protected, but that the challenges to the constitutionality of the bans do not survive intermediate scrutiny, he said. But amici supporting Maryland have long argued that guns like the AR-15 rifle aren't within the ambit of the Second Amendment. Their counsel, Jonathan Kleebaum of Cotton Muchin and Rosenmon, LLP, Chicago, told Bloomberg B&A. Heller controls. The U.S. Supreme Court recognized an individual right for citizens to bear arms for protection in their homes. In the District of Columbia versus Heller, 554 U.S. 570, 2008. But the weapons that are most useful in military service are outside the scope of that Second Amendment right, it said. Maryland's ban on AR-15 rifles and detachable large-capacity magazines fell under Heller's exception, the Fourth Circuit held. The court has no power to extend Second Amendment protection to weapons of war that Heller decision explicitly excluded from such coverage. If such weapons are entitled to Second Amendment protection, however, the ban would be constitutional. Under a intermediate scrutiny analysis, the court said, reasonable restrictions allowed. Heller is often misread to say that the government can't restrict gun possession, but it actually makes clear the reasonable restrictions are allowed, Baum said. The Fourth Circuit's opinion is consistent with Heller, he added. Astrachan disagreed. Instead, he said the opinion is so far out in front of the pack as to be lost from sight. No other court has held that the guns at issue aren't protected by the Second Amendment because they are like machine guns or military rifles, he said. They have generally said that assault weapons are protected by the Second Amendment, but don't withstand intermediate scrutiny, he said. In any case, Baum said that bans like Maryland's pass intermediate scrutiny because they are reasonable fit for protecting public safety. All right, let's go over here to the other article. Right to bear arms eviscerated. Dissenting Judge William B. Traxler, Jr., joined by Judges Paul V. Niemeyer, Dennis W. Shedd, and G. Stephen Alge, complained that the majority eviscerated the constitutionally guaranteed right to keep and bear arms. He also contended that Maryland's ban be analyzed using strict scrutiny standard. He wrote the original panel opinion and was joined in part by Augie. Bradley Orant, Bolt Cummings, LLP, represented the plaintiffs. Maryland Attorney's General Office represented the state. By Bernie Pozanowski. To contact the reporter on this story, Bernie Pozanowski in Washington at bpozanowski@bna.com. To contact the editor responsible for this story, Jesse Cochran Commons at jcommons@bna.com. Full text at http://src.bna.com/mm4. Friends to Republic and Liberty. Let me This is very disheartening. Here is another blatant disregard for our individual liberty, our Bill of Rights, and our Bill of Rights. Here is another example of the tyranny of the courts. Our old friends of the old republic feared the new executive branch of the newly formed national government because the president in charge of the military could take over as a new monarch, replacing the British tyranny for an American tyranny. Well, those fears have never really manifested. There is a worse enemy to liberty, the judicial branch. They are not elected like our other public masters, servants, and not accountable to constituents, leaving them able to be unbiased, uncorruptible by campaign financing or corporate lobbying. But at the same time, they are left to their own devices to take away our rights by judicial decision, one bite out of the liberty cookie at a time. In a republic, rights are never up for a vote. In a republic, rights can never be sacrificed for public safety or this infamous compelling or substantial government interest. The court said it has no power to extend the Second Amendment protection to the weapons of war, that the Heller decision explicitly excluded from such coverage. But somehow the Supreme Court in Heller has the power to say what the Second Amendment doesn't protect? That's interesting because I don't see that power listed in the Article 3 of the Constitution. I'm pretty sure the framers said those rights were inalienable. The Fourth Circuit has now said Second Amendment doesn't protect our AR-15s. Other courts will follow. State courts will follow, and then it'll be all assault weapons. Then what? All semi-automatic firearms. The courts are rendering the militia, all able-bodied citizens, completely ineffective because the courts are determined that our most effective weapons are not protected. How are we supposed to defend liberty? How many bites of the liberty cookie are left? The winter soldier. Okay, let's put that back down to 125. I think this is pretty much the same article, except for maybe just that and that. So let's read just that and that. I'll go back to 200. A federal appeals court upheld Maryland's ban on assault rifles, concluding that the powerful military-style guns outlawed by the measure are not entitled to protection under the Second Amendment 10-4 ruling, issued by the entire Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia. Reverses a decision by a smaller panel of judges from the court last year that called the law's constitutionality into question. The bill was passed in 2013 in the wake of the deadly shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. Friends of Liberty in Maryland. This is very disheartening. Here is another example of what I have been saying for a while. The state legislated away its citizens' Second Amendment rights, and the courts go and uphold it. It seems there is a collusion between the legislative and judicial branches of the state governments, and maybe a collusion between the state government and the federal government. Collusion is defined in Black's Law Dictionary, 10th edition, as an agreement to defraud or to do something forbidden by law. Maybe there wasn't a handshake agreement between the branches, but just a proverbial nod to the legislature that I got your back on this when the case comes to my court. Second Amendment says shall not be infringed to the government. So to ban certain guns is to do what is forbidden by the law, the supreme law. How many licks to the center of the lollipop? Maryland, what do you... Hold on. My phone is going crazy. So to ban certain... Okay, yeah. How many licks to the center of the lollipop, Maryland? Why do you let your legislature take your lollipop, the winter soldier? Okay, let me Move this back over, go back to 125. And move this over just a bit. All right, what else we got? Okay, it looks like there's just more newspaper articles. I'm just going to, you can pause it here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'll go down here. You can pause that. We got another Florida article. So I'll pause it right here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'll pause it at the bottom of the page. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let me read this last part right here. Friends to the Constitution and liberty. Let me make that 200%. There we go. No sooner do I perform the last keystroke from my last article on this issue and another bite is taken out of the Liberty cookie. No sooner. This time by Florida Supreme Court, and they just took a big bite by my estimates. Just as the previous law reporter, Article 1, wrote about here, again is another example of blatant disregard for our individual liberty and Bill of Rights. Here again is another example of the tyranny of the courts. Here again we see the language, the perverters of our Constitution. That language is these words: important governmental interest. Other variations include compelling or substantial governmental interest. The legislative branches can slap that label on any bill, and the courts will always find it constitutional when it comes to gun laws. If the state bans open carry, they can control who can carry guns off their own property through concealed carrying permitting. Like we all know, keeping and bearing arms shall not be infringed. But what is it that the government doesn't understand about the word infringed? The Liberty cookie is nearly gone. The two enemies of the people are criminals and government. The two enemies of the people are criminals and government. So let us tie the second down with the chains of the Constitution. Let us tie the second down with the chains of the Constitution, so the second will not become the legalized version of the first. Thomas Jefferson. But what do we do when the beast loosens its chains and begins devouring? The Winter Soldier. All right, that's some letters from Schuyler Barbeau. We'll make sure this gets up on YouTube. Please write Schuyler a letter. Let him know you haven't forgotten about him. I know he's a tough Marine, been in the Marines. He's been in the Army National Guard, was honorably discharged. But it doesn't hurt that he knows that there's a few people out here that hadn't forgotten about him. God bless every one of you and have a great day.